So I've worked as a research scientist for the government on different contracts with Department of Defense, DARPA, for on and off 20 years. Very scientific minded, everything logical, despite having many paranormal experiences in my life and being attracted to tarot and witchcraft and things like that. I still was like, if I can't see it, taste it, measure it, it doesn't exist. So, in my opinion, there was no anything after. It just didn't resonate with me. I thought it was all hocus pocus, whatever. I had an ectopic pregnancy that ruptured, and I bled out more than half of my blood supply. I joked earlier in the day, I said, God, I'm bleeding so much, I'm gonna die. And I was joking, and then I woke up in the hospital. Um, and I lost like over half of my blood, and I started feeling really sick at one point, and this panic came over me that I cannot. It was I'm gonna for anyone that has done any kind of drugs in their life, I will say that it was basically like you took every drug known to man all at the same time, and it all decided to kick in all at the same time. And this like feeling of intense overwhelm of panic beyond any panic I'd ever felt before came over me. And like just as I was feeling I was going to explode, literally, like actually literally explode, I was no longer in my body. And I was just like when you release a balloon in a house and it goes to the ceiling and bounces off the, ceiling, that's what I was doing. I was bouncing like onto the ceiling, and I look down and I see myself there. And I had one epic thought, and it was, that sucks, in my sarcastic tone of voice and everything. And I was like, oh crap, my personality is still intact. Right. So that was apparent. And I'm watching them do CPR, crash cart, and they and then I don't know how to say, it's like time stops, kind of. It was 6 minutes. It was 5 minutes, 56 seconds. I was gone, but it was like forever. If I looked to my right, I was in the hospital room. If I looked to my left, I was somewhere else, in this other like a room. But it's not because I couldn't see walls, but I knew I was in a space that's really hard to describe. Um, and I didn't see any. There was no tunnel. There was no relatives. There was no other people at all. It was just me and me. But I'll get to that. So I'm watching them. I'm still looking at my body and like what's going on. And they call time of death, and they stop. And one of the doctors comments about how I was just like, my records had said I had had a drug addiction previously. And he made a comment about that, like some offhand remark about like a junkie. I didn't even do heroin or anything, but like like I was just a drug addict. And they stopped trying, right? It couldn't have been more than 6 minutes that they were trying. Okay. So I'm like, okay, well, there's that. And then I went to the left. And I'm in the left, and I'm in this room, I guess, that's white, like it's glowing, but I can't tell where it's coming from. The light source is coming from, but it was very familiar. I knew exactly where I was, but I had no idea where I was. Um, I thought, oh my God, my kids, right? So the second I thought that, I was transported 210 miles away to Fresno, California, where my oldest daughter, who was 21 at the time, 21 at the time, was taking an exam in her class in college. And I saw her, I saw the time on the wall, I saw what she was wearing, and I was like, she's fine. And then I'm like, my little one, Lucy, who was barely gonna be 2, and I see her in the waiting room in the hospital playing Legos. And I'm like, okay. And then that was that. And I went back to the left again, and I was alone, but I wasn't alone. Like, I don't know how to say that. I wasn't scared in any way. And then I saw myself. So I see a version of myself standing in front of me all of a sudden, and she looks like me, but not exactly, but very like a doppelganger situation. And in my mind, she said like one word to me. And that one word was coded with so many messages within it, and it's still unraveling today. But the word was nope. That was it. Nope. And I knew immediately what that meant because I was going back. And I got so we're huge. Okay, like we're humongous. We're huge. Like we're like I have chills talking about you're everywhere. Like I could see 360 degrees because I don't have a head with bones that is like impeding my vision, but I also don't have eyes. So I don't know how that works. But I could see everything around me in the weirdest way, and I could tell that I was a form of some kind, but not in a body. Like I don't know how else to, like that I had a specific density to me, but I was also intermingling with others. It's very hard to describe. But I was huge and I was thinking I'm never going to fit back in that body, right? And so, but I did, and that's when I saw the tunnel. So I saw the tunnel going back in through the belly button, and which was very weird to me because I'd never heard anything about the navel or being any kind of entry point of spirit or something. So I got shoved back in, and it hurt so bad that that's what brought me back to life.
I remember the first resuscitation in the back of the ambulance. That was probably a really vivid one. And but in connection with your question about being a seer, I come from a family of seers from on my mother's side, and it's all kind of filtered down from granny. But I'd actually seen my death, and I called my mother, and she was living a bit of a wayward life, to be honest with you, John. I wasn't paying attention to that internalized voice that most of us have, that intuitive voice. I was choosing to go against that. So I knew something was coming. But I wasn't expecting what did come. Right? Right. So I spoke to my mother on a Wednesday, said I'd seen this, heard this voice, Tom was going to die, and then Sunday came, and Sunday night came, and wow, lo and behold. Yes, a very beautiful experience. The first one, terrifying. That was when I woke and realised that I was in serious trouble. Something was wrong. Please forgive me for, in fear of repeating myself, if anyone else who's watched any of my other videos, is that I did pick up the phone, managed how to call this phone. I dialed in the UK, it's 999 if you need help, and I managed to hit 2 nines, and I collapsed on the floor with the phone still in my hand. And about 2 months previous, I saved my cat's life. He was being attacked by a dog, and I beat the dog off. Cat went one way, dog ran the other. Anyway, when he came back eventually that night, he was okay, he was unharmed. But I remember pointing my finger at him and saying, "Dude, you owe me one." And so there I was lying on the floor. And what brought me round?
Little did you know he gave you 8 or 9.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, something he did. More than I needed. He was pretty generous. So he sniffed my nose, he licked my nose, and it was an incredible fishy smell off his breath, you know, and that rasp. And that brought me round. And that was when the alarm bells were really ringing, like, you know, like you're in trouble, Ray. And so I hit the last 9, and the paramedics turned up. And I sat with him for quite a while until I live in a really small town, and it kind of closes up at 9 o'clock. So off in the distance, I could hear the ambulance coming, and they got to me just before 12. And by the time they sort of came in, I was in a really rough state. And Bill was to my left. We both were sitting on the couch, and I just couldn't move. And I was a very fit guy at the time. They're cycling and exercising, and I just couldn't believe I didn't move. And I looked to my right, and in came the 2 paramedics. They asked me to leave my front door open, so I did. And as I lay there dying, in they came. They walked me to the ambulance, and I couldn't believe how slowly I was walking, John. That was the thing that hit me the most. It was coming out of my house and being treated like somebody who maybe 100 years old, and like really struggling to comprehend things and what people were saying to me. So I walked in the back of the ambulance, and this is where the part of Raymond O'Brien as a seer comes in. I'm in the back of the ambulance, and I'm lying on the gurney, and really, really puffing and panting for air. You know, just couldn't breathe. They're about to pull off. The male driver was about to pull off, but the female paramedic, her name was Rebecca. She played quite an important part in saving my life. She put her back to me. I don't know whether you know, but when you're having a cardiac arrest, one of the symptoms is that you become very nauseous. You start vomiting. So anybody out there, again, these are warning signs. If you're getting chest pains and you're starting to vomit, be very careful what's going on. At least take an aspirin if you can, just to thin the blood. And if it worsens, you know what to do. So that's this mine ran on for quite a while. So that's an important thing that many don't tell us, And so I'm vomiting into this bowl in the back of the ambulance. And I remember the paramedic going to me, "So what did you have for dinner tonight then?" And I said, "Well, chocolate, peanuts and raisins, and I had a bottle of cider." She said, "That's why you're not well." And I'll tell you what, John, she turned her back to me. And at that moment, and this is where the seeing side of me came in, I put my chin on my shoulder and I remember saying, "If there's ever a time to check out, Ray, now's the time." And the next thing, I was on the other side. And I was this little, tiny, sexless soul that didn't have a stitch of clothing on. But I just felt incredible. I stood on this panoramic view that was in front of me. I stood, and the first thing that met me was the wind, and it passed right through me, just went back out, and then kind of did this. I haven't said this before, but it did this circle, this roundabout way, and it connected with 3 women and 2 men who were up in the distance ahead of me. But I wasn't concerned with them because I had no fear, and I had no pain. I just had this feeling of absolute bliss, is the only way that I could describe it. And the wind was like snuggling under your warmest duvet. It just felt that warm and right. It felt like it was the gatekeeper for those who were waiting to come in. And I remember standing there looking at my toes, because the grass was a really vivid green, and it felt really smooth between my toes. And as I looked down, I remember thinking to myself, "I wonder where I go." So I knew where I was. I wonder where I go to get my wings. That was a little joke that I had with myself while I stood there. And as I looked ahead, I see the 2 males and the 3 females, and I waited. I just stood there. And the first male looked at me. The first female looked at me, and there were 3 of them in a row. The second poked her head, so I've got all 3 with their heads now like poking, looking at me standing there. And I heard one woman say something to the first man, who was a younger man of the 2. She said, "Raymond's here," and he looked, and there was an old guy next to him who looked like Fred, who looked like, I was going to say Fred the Angel, but that's later in the story. He looked like Santa Claus, but he had a brown book, a brown tanned book. And I thought the eldest guy who looked like Santa Claus is not, for some reason, not talking to me. So I made a conscious effort to move to where they were. And I remember kind of almost looking over the old guy's shoulder with his tan book, and he lifted up his head and he just said, "He shouldn't be here." And he did that with a movement of his hand. And the next thing I know, I'm in the back of the ambulance, and I've got the paramedic looking down at me, and I'm looking back at her, and she said, "Are you all right, Ray?" "Yeah." I said, "I'm really sorry about that." I said, "I was just on the other side there." And she looked at me, she went, "Do you go on the other side a lot, Ray?" I said, "Yeah, I come from a family of seers. It's something that, she said, "You died, And I remember looking up at her thinking, She went, "Your eyes rolled in the back of your head." And she leant across me and flicked an LED clock that was on the side wall of the ambulance. She said, "This clock turned to 0 at the exact moment that you died." She said, "No, I've never seen that before." And I thought, "Well, all right." So I said, "Well, if you park up, I'll make you a cup of tea, and I'll tell you about being a seer." And that was, again, she said, "No, you died, Ray. We can't move. We're still outside your house, and we can't move until we resuscitate you." And off we went. We were, luckily, the hospital was only sort of 10 minutes away from me. And I'm bouncing along in the back of the ambulance, and I'm thinking, this is all wrong. Like, they've got this totally wrong. It's a bad dream. Whatever it is, it's not real life. And I heard and felt the ambulance slow down. The doors crashed open. I bounced out the back, and as I was bounced out the back, I could hear them talking about what was wrong with me. They gave my age and told me that I had a cardiac arrest in the back of the ambulance and I'd been resuscitated. And as they're pushing me into the crash room, into ICU, I was watching all of the fluorescent lights just kind of flick over my head. And I was sort of thinking, wait until the lads hear about this one. This is something else, like, you know. It's just like, and then I get into the treatment room, and everyone's waiting, like, you know, and they're all kind of staring at me, and I can tell by the look on their faces of like, why is he in here? And because I felt all right, I felt great. I thought this is all wrong, like, you know, and you guys are going to be really foolish when you find out you got this wrong. Anyway, it all turned from that moment on. And it wasn't a pleasure anymore. It was an absolute fright night. It was horrific, absolutely horrific. Everything to feel, and I'm sure you know this, to feel your body heat dissipate is a peculiar feeling, isn't it? It was just like it was new to me, and that reluctance of and at that moment, when I felt that sensation, I heard this lovely Irish voice ask me for my next of kin's telephone number. And I distinctly remember saying to her, stupid thing to say, am I that bad? And she went, yeah, you are. She said, we don't know if you're going to sort of survive this. And I'm thinking, wow. And I had the presence of mind to look at the clock. And I said, look, what's my mother? Like, you know, she's not well. She's got dementia. So, you know, if you are going to call her, can you only call her after I've gone? Don't call her beforehand, because she'll never get here. No one will ever get here, you know, if I'm as bad as you say. You know? So she said, yeah, okay. If you don't make it, that's what we'll do. And then I kind of held on to the reins, really. And it was, I went to a place called The Grey. I'd met a guy who came to see me as a seer. From California Dave, I called him. He had a brain tumor. I've met him in a place called The Grey, and it's a place that I had not heard about until I was interviewed by an NDE survivor called Tim Tobias, and I happened to mention to him if everything was a similar color, and I'd met California Dave there, and he said this place has been described before, Ray. He said, in my 20 years of doing research, he said, you're either the second or the third person who's mentioned this, you know. He said, what was the experience like? And I remember being in a like tiny soul, but you know, when a football game finishes and everybody kind of shuffles out, that's what it felt like. But there was no vivid colors. Everything was different shades of grey, shall we say. So I remember floating up again, and I felt myself become level with Dave's shoulder, and we looked at each other. And I went, Dave? And he went, Ray? And he said, what are you doing here? You know, he went, you shouldn't be here. So this is the second person who said this to me. You know? I said, I don't know what I'm doing here, Dave. And as I'm talking to him, I'm still rising. And it's allowed me to have a look out above all of the heads. And to my right, I could see the wind. And the wind wasn't like it was in my first experience, beautiful, gorgeous, powerful. It was a carbon black. It looked like razor wire, and it was whipping over people's heads. And as it whipped and cracked, it kind of shattered into these little carbon pieces, like, you know. And I felt myself get to a certain level. And I remember consciously saying to myself, I'm so happy I'm not stuck here. And the next thing, I was like I passed through something. And now I can feel my nose on the ceiling tiles of the ICU unit. And the little tiny pimples that were within the ceiling tiles, but with this feeling of falling backwards. You know, when you've fallen out of bed, when you've been sleeping, and there's that almost that moment where you're suspended in air until the body kind of goes, you know, what you're waiting for it, like, you know.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was, and I remember splashing back into my body. It was like a car crash fit. And with that car crash fit, I could hear the medics going, Ray, it's us. So I had 2 on each arm, 2 on each leg. I was swearing profusely at them, asking them what on earth they beep think they were doing to me, and then gone again. And this went on, you know, for at least an hour, maybe a bit more.
In 2001, I fractured my back. I fell and fractured two vertebrae, and I ended up having to have back surgery. And they waited a year to do surgery, so I had extensive damage. And the day after surgery, they were trying to get my pain managed, and they couldn't get it managed, and they had me on IV morphine drip. And I stopped breathing and coded, and I was pronounced dead. My mom was in the room with me, and she said the room was in complete chaos. But I didn't experience any of that. I didn't see my body. I know that's common for a lot of near-death experiencers, but my death was so sudden, it was like I woke up on the other side. And it was like going through a doorway. When I initially realized what was going on, what I could see around me was a velvety black, inky curtain, for lack of a better way to describe it. It's really difficult to describe what it looked like. The way that I typically describe it is it looked like a wall of black energy that had different colors of black in it. It's not black like we know it to be here. And it was like it was alive. I crossed through it, and around me, I felt countless numbers of souls with me. I can't even put a number to it. It was extensive. And I didn't recognize anyone visually, but I could feel their energy. So I knew that I knew who they were in life, and I knew they knew me. There were some that I didn't know from life, but they knew who I was. And the thing that I remembered the most is the extensive love. The love was just, it defies description. It's completely different and so much deeper than anything I've ever experienced here. Which was amazing to me because I had kind of a difficult childhood. I have a disability, and I've struggled through life to kind of learn to love myself and to be accepted. So it wasn't something that I was used to. And I had gone through a lot of emotional turmoil growing up. So it gave me the experience that I didn't have while I was on this plane of existence. And when I realized what was going on and saw the other souls around me, they didn't have bodies. They were light beings. It wasn't like looking out and saying, oh, there's grandma and grandpa. But I knew that they were grandma and grandpa when they were with me in this life. Also, like I said, the love was just absolutely immense. I didn't have a life review. And a lot of people think that I'm gonna give you some information about myself that I don't share with a lot of people because it's kind of important. I was suicidal when I was a teenager, and I attempted suicide twice. A lot of people think that if you've done that, you're not going to have a positive afterlife. For me, it was the exact opposite. I was not judged for it. I was embraced. I was told that I needed to come back and share what I had experienced and to let people know not to be afraid that we don't die. I didn't see any religious figures, but the spirituality there is absolutely just vast. And it's love. There really isn't any other aspect to what I experienced was the love. And I was told that was what I needed to come back to share.